What you're about to witness is the most emotionally devastating promise ever kept inside a courtroom. A promise so pure, so painfully human, that it silenced an entire room and reminded everyone present what honor truly looks like. When 88-year-old homeless veteran Robert Bobby Chen limped into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom one cold November morning, nobody could have guessed that beneath his battered shoes and weathered face lived a story spanning 70 years. A story of brotherhood, sacrifice, and a soldier's word that refused to die, no matter the cost. He wasn't there for some criminal charge or dramatic act of defiance. He was there because of a traffic citation, a pedestrian violation for walking on the shoulder of a highway. To most people, it would have been a small, forgettable case. But within 10 minutes of hearing Bobby's trembling voice, that courtroom would stop breathing. People who'd seen everything, police officers, attorneys, clerks hardened by years of witnessing tragedy, would find themselves wiping away tears as an 88-year-old man explained why he had walked for 11 days, with blistered and bleeding feet, to keep a 70-year-old promise to a dying brother in arms. It was early. The courtroom heater buzzed faintly against the bitter November chill seeping through the old courthouse windows in Providence, Rhode Island. Judge Caprio, known across the nation for his kindness and wisdom, sat quietly reviewing the morning docket. Parking tickets, expired registrations, routine citations, the sort of cases he'd handled thousands of times before. He had no reason to think this Tuesday would be any different. At precisely 9:47 a.m., the double doors at the back of the courtroom creaked open. Slowly, almost uncertainly, an elderly man shuffled through. His steps were deliberate, painful. Every movement looked like it cost him effort. Heads turned instinctively. The bailiff, Officer Tony Ritchie, took a step forward, ready to assist, but the old man waved him off gently with a trembling hand. "I can make it, son," he whispered. "I made it this far." He was wearing a faded military jacket several sizes too big. The fabric was worn so thin in places you could almost see through it. His pants were held up with a length of frayed rope. A baseball cap, bleached nearly white with age, sat crooked on his head, the embroidered words barely visible anymore: U.S. Army, Korea, 1950-1953. But it wasn't his clothes that silenced the room, it was his presence, his posture, bent yet dignified, his eyes clouded with age but burning with determination, and his feet, wrapped in dirty cloth and duct tape, leaving faint marks of blood on the tiled floor. Every step looked like agony, yet he refused to stop. You could tell immediately this man wasn't there to beg or complain. He was there to fulfill something far greater than anyone in that courtroom yet understood. For several minutes, Bobby stood quietly near the back of the room, leaning on the pew for balance as other defendants were called. He didn't sit down. Sitting and rising again would hurt too much. He just shifted his weight slowly from one foot to the other, wincing silently. People stole glances at him but said nothing. Finally, the clerk called his name. Robert Chen. Citation for pedestrian violation. Walking on highway shoulder. Bobby took a deep breath and shuffled forward toward the defendant's stand. The sound of his dragging shoes against the floor echoed through the quiet courtroom. Judge Caprio looked up from his papers, and his entire demeanor changed. The instant he saw Bobby, his trembling hands, the way he leaned heavily on the table to steady himself, his practiced neutrality vanished, replaced by pure concern. "Mr. Chen," he said gently, setting down his pen. "Before we discuss this citation, are you all right? Would you like to sit down?" Bobby straightened as much as his fragile frame would allow. "I'm fine, Your Honor," he said with quiet dignity. "Just walked a ways, that's all." Judge Caprio frowned slightly. "I notice your feet are wrapped. Have you seen a doctor?" "No need, Your Honor. They'll heal. I just need to take care of this ticket, then get back on the road." That last part made the judge pause. Something in Bobby's tone wasn't defiance, it was urgency. A desperate determination. Caprio had been on the bench for nearly 4 decades. He'd seen guilt, fear, lies, excuses. But this was something different. The man before him wasn't trying to escape punishment. He was trying to finish something. "Mr. Chen," Caprio said slowly, "you're charged with walking on the shoulder of Interstate 95, a dangerous highway. The citation says you were stopped near mile marker 47. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "The trooper was kind, gave me water, drove me here instead of just writing me up there on the highway." "Why?" Caprio asked. "Were you walking on the highway in the first place? There are safer roads. What were you trying to reach?" Bobby's lips tightened, his eyes growing glassy. He hesitated before answering. "Your Honor, I'm trying to get to Portland, Maine." Caprio blinked. "Portland? That's nearly 200 miles from here." "Yes, sir. Been walking 11 days. Started in New Haven, Connecticut. About 60 miles left to go." The words hung in the air like a shockwave. "You've walked 140 miles. The judge repeated, his voice a mix of disbelief and awe. "At 88 years old." "Yes, sir." "But why? Why would you do that?" And that was the moment everything changed. Bobby looked down at his bandaged feet, then back up at the judge. His voice softened, trembling just slightly. "Because, Your Honor, I made a promise 70 years ago. And I'm running out of time to keep it. The room went still. Even the hum of the heating system seemed to fade. Judge Caprio rose slowly from his bench, a gesture he reserved for moments that deserved his deepest respect. "Mr. Chen," he said softly, "I think you need to tell us about this promise." Bobby swallowed hard. He turned, glancing at the small audience of defendants, officers, and clerks. Then he began to speak, his voice fragile at first but gaining strength as the memories poured out. "Your Honor, in 1951, I was 19 years old, fresh out of basic training, shipped off to Korea. On the transport ship I met another private, James Murphy from Portland, Maine. We bunked next to each other. Over that 2-week trip across the Pacific we became brothers, not by blood but by war." His wrinkled hands trembled as he continued, each word pulling him back to a past he'd never truly left. "Jimmy and I went through hell together. The chosen reservoir, winter of 50, -35 degrees. We were surrounded, Chinese forces on all sides. We watched boys freeze to death in their foxholes. We held the line 17 days while MacArthur evacuated troops. Jimmy saved my life 3 times. Once he carried me 2 miles through enemy fire after I caught shrapnel in my leg. By now the courtroom was transfixed. Nobody moved. Nobody even blinked. Judge Caprio had stepped down from the bench, standing just a few feet from Bobby. No barrier between them now, just 2 men connected by understanding. "One night," Bobby went on, his eyes glistening, "we were huddled in a frozen foxhole. We both thought we wouldn't see morning. So we made a pact. We promised that if one of us was dying, the other would come, no matter what, no matter how far, no matter how long it took, because too many boys were dying alone out there, crying for their mothers, with no one who knew them, no one who loved them." The judge's own eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Chen," he whispered. "Your friend Jimmy?" Bobby nodded slowly. His voice cracked. 2 weeks ago I got a call from Jimmy's daughter. I don't have a phone, but she found me through the VA. Said her father's in hospice. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Doctors gave him maybe 2 weeks. And he asked for me. He took a shaky breath, fighting emotion. He remembered that promise. 70 years later, he asked if I could come. I told his daughter I'd be there. I promised Jimmy all those years ago, and I wasn't about to break that promise now. Bobby lowered his gaze, ashamed yet proud. "But, Your Honor, I'm homeless. Been that way 6 years. Lost my apartment after my pension check stopped covering rent. No family left. I didn't have money for a bus ticket. Barely have money for food most days. So I started walking. 11 days ago. I left New Haven with my old boots, a small backpack, and Jimmy's picture. But now the room was filled with quiet sobs. Officer Ricci stood near the wall, his face wet with tears. The court reporter had long stopped typing. Even the other defendants, people waiting to fight fines or plead guilty, were crying openly. Bobby's voice trembled as he continued. "That state trooper who stopped me yesterday, he was kind. Gave me water, some energy bars, and a ride here instead of leaving me out there. But I can't stop now. Jimmy doesn't have much time. I figure if I keep walking 15 miles a day, I can reach him in 4 more days." Judge Caprio, usually composed, was visibly shaken. His eyes glistened, his voice gentle yet filled with gravity. "Mr. Chen, Bobby, with your feet in that condition, your age, the cold, do you really believe you can walk another 60 miles? Bobby stood as straight as his aching body allowed, chin up, voice steady. "Your Honor, I walked through the Korean winter in 1950 with frostbite and shrapnel wounds. I can walk through New England in November for my brother. I don't have a choice. Jimmy needs me." A murmur of awe rippled through the room. It wasn't just the words, it was the conviction behind them. You could feel the truth of his heart in every syllable. Judge Caprio leaned forward. "Bobby, where have you been sleeping during this journey?" "Highway rest stops mostly. Some church doorways. One diner owner let me sleep in his storage room. People are good, Your Honor. More good than not." "And your feet?" the judge asked softly. "When did they become injured?" "About day 3, Bobby said, looking down at his makeshift bandages. "My boots came apart. Got blisters turned to sores. I clean them best I can at rest stops they'll hold." Judge Caprio exhaled deeply. He looked at Bobby, then at Officer Ricci. The emotion in the room was palpable. Every instinct in Caprio told him this was no ordinary case, and no ordinary man. What he did next would change not just one life, but many. Judge Caprio sat silently for several seconds after hearing the old woman's trembling words. The courtroom, usually filled with murmurs and shifting feet, was still. So still that even the sound of the clock ticking above the flag seemed louder. Everyone had been expecting excuses, maybe even a denial. But what came out of the grandmother's mouth had stripped the room of breath. Her name was Eleanor Whitman, 70, 5 years old, widowed for over a decade, living on a fixed income from her late husband's pension that barely covered rent and medication. She had entered that department store not to take something for herself, but for her granddaughter, her only family left in the world. Her granddaughter Lily was 17, graduating from high school with honors, and had been invited to prom. She'd saved all year working part-time at a diner, hoping to afford a dress. But 2 weeks before prom, her mother, Eleanor's daughter, had passed away after a long battle with ovarian cancer. When Eleanor spoke of her daughter, her voice cracked, her frail hands gripping the edge of the stand as if it were the only thing holding her up. "She was my baby," she said softly, and when she went, Lily just stopped smiling. Eleanor explained that after the funeral, she found Lily sitting on the bed, holding a picture of her mother and saying, "I just wish you could see me in my prom dress, Mama. You always promised you'd help me pick one." Those words haunted Eleanor. She couldn't afford even a used gown, not with rent overdue and her electricity about to be cut off. She'd gone to every thrift shop, every charity store, but the dresses were either too worn, too small, or too expensive. Then one afternoon she walked into the department store, just to look, she said, just to see what her granddaughter might have worn if life had been kinder. She saw the dress. It was a simple satin gown, pale blue with a silver waistline. Nothing extravagant, but it shimmered like hope. She stood there for nearly an hour, touching the fabric, imagining Lily's smile. Then, in a moment she couldn't explain, desperation outweighed judgment. "I wasn't thinking like a thief," Eleanor whispered through tears. "I was thinking like a grandmother who didn't want her granddaughter to feel forgotten." When the officer detained her, she didn't resist. She only asked him, "Please, don't tell her." The courtroom's silence broke when Judge Caprio removed his glasses and pressed them against his lips. His eyes glistened. He leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Whitman," he said gently, "you've lived 75 years without a single mark against your name. You raised your family, served your community, and faced loss no one should bear. What you did was wrong in the eyes of the law, but I understand why your heart did it." Eleanor nodded weakly. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, Your Honor. I just wanted her to have one good memory." Caprio paused, then turned toward the prosecutor, a young man who'd clearly been moved, but was trying to maintain professionalism. "Mr. Stanton," the judge said, "what's the state's position on this?" The prosecutor hesitated. "Your Honor, given the circumstances, I'd say the state is open to leniency." Caprio smiled faintly. "That's good to hear, because I think this is one of those moments where the law must meet humanity halfway." He looked back at Eleanor. "Tell me, Mrs. Whitman, did Lily ever get to go to the prom?" Eleanor lowered her eyes. "No, sir. I couldn't bear to tell her what I'd done. She said she didn't feel like going anymore anyway. She said her mom wouldn't be there to see it." A soft gasp rippled through the room. The judge closed his file slowly. "Ms. Whitman," he said, "if your daughter could see you now, I think she'd be proud. Not of what you did, but of why you did it." He leaned back, his voice thick with compassion. "You broke the law, yes, but you did it for love. And sometimes love makes us do foolish things. I won't pretend this court can erase your pain, but maybe we can do something right today." He turned toward the audience benches. "Is Lily here with you today?" Eleanor shook her head. "She doesn't know, Your Honor." Caprio nodded thoughtful. "Then maybe it's time she does. Because she deserves to know how much her grandmother loves her." He signaled to an officer. "Officer, can you please bring in the bag on my desk?" The officer returned with a plain white garment bag. Judge Caprio unzipped it slightly, revealing a glimmer of satin blue. "I reached out to the store earlier this week," he explained, "and told them what happened. They dropped the charges and donated this dress instead. I wanted to give it to you personally, to give to Lily." Eleanor covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. The audience clapped softly, some wiping their eyes. But the story didn't end there. Judge Caprio, known for his compassion, invited Eleanor and Lily to return a week later, to show the court a picture of Lily in her dress. When they came back, the entire courtroom seemed transformed. Lily walked in, holding her grandmother's hand, her eyes bright though rimmed with tears. She wore that pale blue gown. Everyone stood instinctively. The officers, the clerks, even the prosecutor smiled. Judge Caprio stood too, beaming. "Well," he said, "you look absolutely beautiful, young lady. Your mother would be very proud." Lily's voice wavered. "Thank you, Your Honor. My grandma told me everything. I didn't know she'd done that for me." She turned to Eleanor. "I just want to say, I love you, Grandma, and I'm sorry you had to go through all that for me." Eleanor reached up, brushing away her granddaughter's tears. "I'd do it again 1,000 times, sweetheart. You're all I have left." The courtroom erupted into gentle applause. Even the stenographer paused to wipe her eyes. Judge Caprio smiled warmly but then grew serious. "Mrs. Whitman," he said softly, "the law can be stern, but it's not heartless. You're officially free of all charges. But I want you to promise me something from now on. If you ever need help, any kind of help, you reach out. There are people who care." Eleanor nodded, her voice breaking. "Thank you, Your Honor. You've given us more than you know." Caprio leaned forward, lowering his tone so that only she could hear. "You've reminded everyone here why justice isn't just about rules. It's about understanding." That day, news of the hearing spread across social media. The video went viral. Millions watched as the old woman received the dress for her granddaughter, many commenting how they had never seen such kindness in a courtroom. People began donating to help Eleanor and Lily, sending cards, money, and even college offers for the young girl. But the most touching part came weeks later when a small letter arrived at the Providence courthouse, addressed to Judge Caprio himself. Inside was a photograph of Lily at her graduation, smiling brighter than she ever had, wearing a necklace her grandmother had saved from her wedding day. The note read, "Dear Judge Caprio, thank you for believing in my grandma. That day you didn't just forgive her, you gave her back her dignity. You reminded me that love is stronger than any mistake. I'm going to college this fall. I'll make sure her sacrifice wasn't in vain. Lily Whitman." Caprio kept that photo framed on his desk. Whenever a difficult case came before him, when anger rules and frustration tempted him to judge too quickly, he would glance at that photo and remember the lesson that frail grandmother had taught the world. Sometimes mercy is the purest form of justice. And in that courtroom, on that quiet afternoon, humanity won.